Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio on with us right now. Welcome aboard. How are things going, sir? The Todd father.
Things are great. Things are great. Looking forward to a Sunday victory at Assembly Hall, hopefully.
Yeah, that Northwestern is, I've talked about, they have Indiana's kryptonite. Very good guard play. Very good perimeter guard play. And of course, and it starts with Boo Booey. Boom, take a shot. But it's not just him. They just lost Tiberi. Yep. They still have three guards that are averaging double figures that are all shooting over roughly 40% from three. Barry was shooting 43%. The worst shooter that's left is shooting 34%. That's Brooks Barnheiser, an Indiana kid.
Yeah, I mean, look, they're really good. They're a totally different team than they were 2 weeks ago because they've had to restructure everything. And jumping right into it. I mean, if Indiana can figure out a way, I'm gonna really speak out of both sides of my mouth here because I don't want Indiana to have a game plan of let's get it down the floor and every single time down we've got to just figure out a way to throw it inside because it just creates too many turnovers, too many passes. There's too much going on. We need more dribble penetration and that kind of stuff. But on the flip side of that, if Indiana can get that Matthew Nicholson big guy that they have in foul trouble, they have no one to bring in. Like they have no backups inside. They're had to change their lineup. Now they've got Nick Martinelli in the starting lineup, and he used to be basically their whole bench coming in. So outside of some kid who probably doesn't have a career high higher than 10 points, if someone comes in off the bench and has some career day, that's going to be trouble for Indiana. Outside of that, Indiana has a great chance of winning this game because Northwestern is just so thin right now. They just have no depth at all.
Yeah, and this would be a great win for Indiana. It would probably be their best win of the season.
Yeah, well, for sure at this point it would be, and you've got to look at it. What Northwestern is going to try to do. They're going to try to shorten the game. Like I'll be shocked if you don't see Boo Booey just absolutely walking the ball up the floor and crossing the 10-second line at 21 almost every time. That's what they did last night. They tried to make it as short a game as possible, and because they don't have any bench, they don't have an up and down the floor kind of game. And if they get a lead, it's really easy to play that way. If they're behind, they struggle to play that slow when you're behind, when you've got to have some points.
And Indiana can make it very difficult for teams if they have the lead with that inside game because they don't have to get in a hurry. They can pound on you, and they've got two guys down there that are pretty successful in Kel Ware and Malik Renew in wearing you out. And like I said, if they can't stop them on top of just taking their time and lengthening the game, then that's not a recipe for Northwestern.
Yeah, no, it's not. And Indiana, kind of contrary to past years, Indiana has not had bad starts in games. They've actually had pretty darn good starts all the way up through the first media timeout to the second media timeout. They've had some pretty good starts. If they can have another one of those, you put Northwestern into a position where they can't play the way they want to. And if you let them play the way they want to, you're in trouble because they have great guard play. Barnheiser is just a extremely solid player on the verge of probably being one of the league's, better players in the next coming years. You just can't let Northwestern play the way they want to play. And if they get to walk it up the floor, run offense for 20, 25 seconds, and then, get Boo Booey making a play going down the lane or shooting a three, you're going to struggle to beat them. And that's what Rutgers allowed them to do for a good portion of the game last night. The last few ball games, Northwestern has had a couple different defenses tried against them. I think a couple of games ago against Penn State, who also has really good guards, they double teamed Boo Booey most of the time he touched the ball. So they were getting it out of his hands. and they made other people beat them. And, that game was at Northwestern. Northwestern figured out a way to win. Then the game against Rutgers, they didn't do that. They didn't take it out of Boo Booey's hands, but they just made it really hard to drive inside the lane. And that made it so that when Boo Booey started out, he made 6 of his first 7 3-point shots. That's how they were out to the lead they had. But then when those shots weren't going in, I think he finished 6 of 10. So he missed his last 3 3-pointers that he took. And Barnheiser, I think, made the only one in the second half for them. They struggle when you take them out of that part of their game. And that's why Rutgers was able to come back and win in that game last night.
And yes, I mentioned Barnheiser, an Indiana kid.
Yeah.
Like Luke Goody for Illinois, another Indiana kid who is doing well in the Big Ten. It's a shame to see guys like that not brought in, or not kept in the state, but for Indiana, they could have used any or either of those guys. Both shoot the 3 ball.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, Barnheiser's not really a 3-point shooter. He's not a very good 3-point shooder. He's a really good mid-range player for his size.
He's the worst of the bunch at 34.2.
On Indiana, he'd be third best at that percentage. But at 34, I mean, he's not. That's not his favorite shot. He's capable of making it. He's a lot like Galloway. He's capable of making it, but it's not what he would love to do. But he's for his size. He's very physical and strong, good with the ball. He's a tough guard. He's tough to defend. And so
he averages 7 rebounds a game. Not a lot of guards average that many rebounds a game.
He's one of those guys that, I don't know what they really list him as, because if you look at their lineup, I mean, he's really kind of their 4-man. Now that Martinelli's in there, you could probably swing those 2 guys between 3 and 4, whichever one they are. The Matthew Nicholson guys, obviously they're center, but Martinelli and Barnheiser, you could swing back and forth between number 3 and 4. So I mean, he's a big guard, small forward player, but he's good. You're right. I mean, getting out of the state of Indiana, Luke Goody. You look at the roles that those guys are playing on, other Big Ten teams that are not from the state of Indiana, and they could definitely make an impact on this Indiana basketball team. Now, you're not going to get every kid. You're not going to get, you're not even going to get half the kids. But those are ones that you look at. Indiana has a big hole in their roster, and that hole is not an individual type of player. It's a shooter. Like they lack shooting the basketball on a consistent basis. And otherwise, they have everything. They've got height, they've got length, they've got athleticism, they've got good guards, quickness. They've got all of the tools except for the one basketball fundamental thing of being able to shoot the ball consistently well. And, that's why we see some games they look like one of the top 25 teams in the country, and some teams they look like where they're ranked, about number 100.
You mentioned Indiana's had really good starts, and then they seem like they kind of hold on for dear life sometimes.
Yeah.
Is part of that teams making adjustments and Indiana not adjusting to those adjustments?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the way Indiana plays, and Indiana comes down and no matter what the first 2 or 3 passes are in Indiana's offense, 4 or 5 is supposed to go either to Khalil Ware or Malik Renew. Like that's just a known. That every team that plays us knows that. And so, really, if you think about it, it makes it difficult. Think about coaching like a 5th grade team, and when you got young kids, the worst part about running like a motion offense is because they have to make too many passes, and those kids tend to make more errors than older kids, NBA players or college players, you would think. But in Indiana's case, the more passes and things that they make, the more opportunity there is for turnover or bad decisions or a bad play or a bad shot or whatever it might be. And I'm not saying they should come down and jack it right away, but I do think Indiana should come down with a little bit an alternative purpose. And that might be, hey, you know what, guys, let's try to get 5 3-point shots up in the first 10 minutes of the game. Okay, don't put it on them right away and say, hey, we need to shoot a three in the first 3 possessions. But in the first 10 minutes of the game, let's try to get 5 3-point shots up. And I think that would change the mindset a little bit of pound it inside, because that's easy for other teams to figure out a way to defend. And Indiana is good at it. Hey, Malik Renew's a very good player. Khalil Ware, very good player. Take away Zach Edey, those 2 players are probably the most dominant 2 big guys in all of the Big Ten. And figure out a way to defend that. If you don't have surrounding parts that can make plays and make the defenses come out and guard you, a lot of people think that making 3-pointers is just great for the scoreboard. Obviously it is, but it also changes the way teams have to defend you. And when they have to extend, the farther away from the basket defenses have to come, the easier it is for offenses to drive and penetrate and throw it inside and do those things. And right now, Indiana doesn't have enough threats on the outside to make it easy for those guys on the interior.
For Indiana, offensively, especially toward this end of the season, where people are showing all their frustration, the fans, there's so much, they should do this and they should do that, and I'm like, first of all, whoa, you have to remember these players play specific positions that are kind of required to have, not always, but and they just would rather see a player in there as opposed to a positional player. And like Gabe Cupps, no, he does not bring a lot to the table offensively, but he helps the offense in a positive way. But like you said, he doesn't do much. But they also, if you put Trey Galloway at the point, are you limiting what he normally does? Or are you improving the offense? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, so I've thought a lot about this, and so in 1960s, 70s, and 80s, you had 1 through 5 players on the floor. Your 1 player was your point guard, generally your smallest player on the floor, and your best ball handler. Your 2 guy was a shooting guard, and he was the guy who probably took about the most amount of shots. And your 3 guy was a wing player or a small forward, or then your next guy was a forward, and then your 5 guy was a center. Throw that out the window. Like, everyone needs to eliminate that as that's what basketball was in a textbook in 1970. And today, basketball is not that way. Indiana doesn't need, this is going to come across the wrong way because I'm going to use his name. I won't. Indiana doesn't need a true point guard on the floor. Okay. And I will tell you, I think this is what I would do as a coaching staff. And this is what I see other coaching staffs do with teams across the country, is they will pick a guy that the other team that's guarding a player from the other team is guarding him. That's not a pressurable kind of player. So take like a 4-man, whoever's guarding Malik Renew. Malik Renew is probably our best ball handler. That's a 4 or 5 player. Okay? Just to use a number. That's a forward or a center. And no center is going to pressure him and take the ball away from him. Okay. So in that instance, why wouldn't you use that guy just to bring the ball up the floor and initiate your offense and get it going? I don't want him to try to dribble penetrate. I want the ball in his hands with his back to the basket. But just to initiate the offense and get it going, no teams nowadays come down, they throw 1 pass and then throw it into the interior. That's not the way basketball's run anymore. They run weaves and dribble handoffs and ball screens. And there's no reason why the offense needs to be initiated by a true definition number 1 point guard. That's just not reality anymore. Our best guy coming off of a ball screen is Trey Galloway. He's not a point guard. Even when he brings the ball up the floor, please, people, he's not a point guard. Like, that doesn't by definition make you a point guard because you bring the ball up the court. You're just the guy that initiated the offense. And so I want Gabe Cupps to produce a lot more on the court. I think he's capable. I think he's in his own head. I think he's not hearing the right things that are transitioning in his brain. That means I need to produce more. That doesn't just mean points. It can mean points, but it means drive, penetrate, and kick the ball. I mean, this is a good example because Indiana fans, watch enough Purdue to understand this. If Braden Smith did not score a point, he would significantly positively impact the basketball game in a good way for Purdue. Okay. And Gabe Cupps needs to be able to do that same thing. And all he is doing right now is filling a role. He is a facilitator of the ball. If it comes from that person that throws it to me, I throw it to somebody else. He's not creating anything. And so that's the reason why I'm saying, I hate to use his name because I'm not saying I don't want Gabe Cupps to play. I want him to play. I want him to produce. But all 5 positions for Indiana have to produce. And they can't have one that doesn't fulfill some of production on the offensive end of the court. And if they have that, have a person that's not doing that, then you've got to replace them with somebody else. And that's where I see they're at right now.
Yeah, and using someone like Malik Renew, who is quite capable of pushing the ball up the floor, like you said, that really, to me, seems to put the defense in a quandary because they're like, oh, wait a minute. Well, how we're not used to defending this.
Right.
Our guy's out of position. And then you can, if you have a fluent offense, which I think that has been a problem for Indiana, they haven't had the fluidity on offense that they need, even if they did that, but maybe that would just be the impetus to start it. But yeah, Indiana needs to do something different, and that would sure be a hell of a start.
Let's take Northwestern as an example, because they're our next game coming up. And if you took Malik Renew and had him bringing the ball up the floor, he's either going to be guarded by Brooks Barnhizer or Nick Martinelli. And neither one of those guys is going to pressure him in a way where he would not be able or capable of bringing the ball up the floor and initiating the offense. On the flip side of that, if you let Mackenzie Mbako bring the ball up the floor, he's going to be guarded by Ryan Langborn or Nick Martinelli or Brooks Barnhizer, one of those 3 guys. And that person is not going to take the ball away from Mackenzie Mbako. So you have multiple people who are very capable of bringing the ball up the floor that are not going to get pressured, that are going to be able to initiate your offense. And it doesn't need to be a point guard. And I think that's the avenue. Like, look, you look at the schedule right now for Indiana. And this, I understand people can totally make fun of me for saying this, and I get it. I don't have a lot of reason to back this up other than the schedule for Indiana right now is favorable. Like they could very easily. What do we have? Do we have 7 games left or 6?
7.
They could win 6 of those 7 games pretty darn easily. Easily is not the right way. They are very capable of winning 6 of those 7 games, and if they can do that and not lose their first game in the Big Ten tournament, I honestly believe they're an NCAA tournament team. And I know that's laughable.
John's with you. John is right with you.
Yeah, I mean. Look at the numbers. Like, look at who they would beat. Look at where you'd be beating Michigan State. You'd be beating Rutgers. You'd be beating Northwestern. You would put yourself in front of all of those teams in the Big Ten. And then as long as you don't lose on Thursday in the Big Ten tournament, you'd be in a position to have a decent chance at making the tournament. You'd at least be in the conversation anyway. Where right now, I see everyone talking about NIT bids and all that. I've never seen anyone talk about an NIT bid in January and February, ever. Like, it shocks me.